In 1917, James Balfour, British Foreign Secretary, wrote a letter to Lord Rothschild. In this letter, he promised a national home for the Jewish people on the land owned by Palestinians. This promise by the British to a land they did not own, to a people that did not inhabit it, robbed the Palestinians of their possessions, creating 750,000 Palestinian refugees. In 1967, Israel tripled the area it occupied. Israel created 350,000 more Palestinian refugees. The Israeli blockage of Gaza and attacks in 2008, 2012 and 2014 have compounded the suffering of the people in a beleaguered strip. People of Gaza are unable to travel freely and are restricted to import essential materials for schools, building houses, hospitals and daily needs. Over 96% of water in Gaza is now unfit for human consumption, and electricity shortages occur daily. Diseases and malnutrition are rife, and according to the UN, by 2020, Gaza may become uninhabitable. It is the combination of these tragic episodes for the Palestinians that we are marking. This is the time to unite and be a part of the movement to end their suffering. In 2017, Palestine Expo established a major platform in the centre of London in order to push to end the oppression of the Palestinian people. Palestine Expo aims for unity and bringing justice and peace in Palestine.
Palestine is still the issue because it's one of the few places in the world and one of the few political issues and problems in the world which is still misunderstood and still misperceived and misrepresented in this time and age. It's one of the few places where peace processes lead to more violence, where mainstream media and mainstream politics, either intentionally or naively, don't get the main issues that are at the heart of this conflict. So it is not just about the future of Palestine and Israel or the Jews and the Palestinians that we talk about when we discuss Palestine. We discuss an inability, especially in the West, to comprehend and understand one of the most important conflicts that still rages on, that still continues, and affects not only the people who live there, but the region as a whole, and I would say even the world at large. And the reason that we are still talking about Palestine and we're still struggling to explain to people what the issue is about is because there is a tendency to accept a certain narrative, a certain version, a certain story about Palestine and Israel that has very little relevance to the reality on the ground. And this narrative, this version, feeds the so-called peace process, feeds the mainstream media, feeds even the mainstream academia when it engages with the question of Palestine. Now, do they engage with the wrong version or narrative willfully or naively? It doesn't really matter. What matters is that there is a common story that is being told about Palestine that is fabricated based on lies and disables us from moving towards peace and reconciliation in this particular part of the world. You would understand the issue of Palestine if, for instance, you would go back to 1948. a year that is totally absent from the agenda of the peace process, which is hardly dealt with by most of the university courses and lecturers who teach about Palestine. If you go back to 1948, you will understand the reason why the peace process that started in 1967 has led to nowhere. Not only has it not offered us a solution, it in fact created more frustration, despair that is easily translated into violence. If you go back to 1948, you can understand the magnitude of the disaster that Palestine and the Palestinians underwent, and the reason that they will not be able to accept any solution, any reconciliation, unless the events of 1948 are being acknowledged, are being accounted for, and are being integrated into the peace agenda between Israelis and Palestinians. It is only if you go back to 1948 you can understand the story of the 50 years before that. It began with the Balfour Declaration, which we are going to commemorate this year in 2017. It begins with the British promise to a settler colonial movement to be able to colonize a country, a homeland for native indigenous people, even before the British themselves had conquered that country. And with the help of Britain, the settler colonialist movement built a base in the land of someone else. And on the basis of this foundation, developed a colony, a settler colony. Now, a settler colony quite often is different from a classical colony. A settler colony is built on the ideology that the settlers see themselves as the indigenous people and see the indigenous native people as aliens. In some places, it took 100 years for this process to take place, where the settlers came, indigenized themselves, and alienated the natives. In Palestine, it happened even before the first Jewish settlers arrived in Palestine. Already on the way to Palestine, they regarded the Palestinians as aliens and themselves as the true natives of the country. And with the help of the British Empire, this project of turning the natives into aliens and the settlers into natives began to prosper and develop. And one of the basic logics of a settler colonial movement, be it Zionism or be it the white settlers movement in South Africa or in North America, one of the basic logic, one of the basic assumptions of a settler colonialist movement is that the settler colonial project cannot succeed unless you remove the native population, unless you get rid of the native population. So it's not enough to regard the natives as aliens and yourself as a native. That's, of course, the first phase. But the second phase is to get rid of the natives so that you can prosper as the new natives of that particular homeland. Again, in many places in the world, this process was a very long process. In North America, in South America, in Australia, in New Zealand, these processes took more than 100 years, sometimes 150 years to materialize. In Palestine, it took 30 years.